Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Tuesday, July 28th, 2026. I am John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Senior editor Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hi, John.
Washington Free Beacon editor Eliana Johnson. Hi, Eliana.
Hi, John.
And Eliana's predecessor as editor of the Washington Free Beacon, former Commentary, Washington Commentary columnist, now a columnist with Free Expression at the Wall Street Journal and Poobah at the American Enterprise Institute, Matthew Continetti. Hi, Matt.
Hi, John. Full CV available upon request.
Yes,
no. I can have all of my former jobs, all my publications upon request.
Let's go more. Let's do more. Free Press. You were a columnist at Free Press. I don't know. Okay. Weekly Standard. Okay, we're done. Okay, now. Two world leaders in town.
He's written books too, you know.
He's written books. We can save. They can write in, and I'll send it to them for the full resume if that's the audience wants.
Okay. Yeah. Volodymyr Zelensky and Benjamin Netanyahu in Washington today for meetings with Donald Trump. Interesting to note whether Vice President Vance will be in the room to yell at both world leaders, as he seems want to do.
Well, we have some intel on that.
Oh, we do? Okay.
Apparently, he will be present for the Netanyahu meeting, but not the Zelensky meeting because he has to make his way to Capitol Hill to speak at the Lindsey Graham Memorial Service.
Vance.
Correct.
Vance. Okay, because Trump is speaking at the funeral?
And then Trump is speaking, yes, at some point. I'm not sure which event. There's
Later
a memorial at the Capitol beginning at 10 a.m. today, July 28th, and then the funeral is in the afternoon.
Right. And Bibi also nominally in town to attend the funeral.
Yeah, I think both world leaders will go to the funeral.
Right. As they should, since he was the last remaining profound Republican interventionist, warmongering supporter of the Democratic freedom agenda, I would say.
And Yair Lapid is also going, so to represent the opposition. So Israel wants, Yeah,
that's interesting as well. The one interesting thing that I did see that raises interesting questions about what this conversation between Bibi and Trump will be about is that somebody said to Trump, Bibi is coming to talk to you about Pickaxe Mountain. That's the site where it has been leaked to us that the remaining nuclear program, or what remains of the nuclear program, has been moved to this site that is very hard to bomb, apparently, because it's very, very high, and whatever they need to bomb is very deep, and so a bunker buster bomb alone won't do the trick. And Trump got angry at the question and said, "I don't need Bibi to tell me what's going on with Pickaxe Mountain. We have eyes in space. Our eyes are in space, and they can see everything, and they know everything, and it's not a big problem." I don't know what the "it's" there refers to in the phrase. Is it that Pickaxe Mountain is not a big problem, or that getting intelligence on Pickaxe Mountain is not a big problem? But he already sounds annoyed about this meeting or having this meeting, and he said Bibi just wants to be involved. I don't know what to make of any of this, because of course we are in the middle of this total chaos of, are we moving forward? Are we going to attack Iran? Are we backing off? Do we not have enough missiles? Is the leak that we have enough missiles actually intended to help Trump not go forward, or is it an attempt to convince Trump not to go forward by leaking the information? We are in a mess about understanding what the motivations, and ideas are behind where we are with Iran. And maybe, Matt, you can just untangle the Gordian knot for us, shall we?
Sure. I'll be happy to try, John. I think the first place to start is to go back a year. Consider President Trump's relations with these two leaders a year ago. In 2025, Bibi makes the first of his 8 visits to Trump this term. and says, we get out of that Trump's declaration that America would take over the Gaza Strip and rebuild it into a luxurious resort community. And Bibi's is kind of gobsmacked like all of us. And it's a sign of how there was no daylight between the United States and Israel. And then a month later, we have the infamous visit of Zelensky in the Oval Office getting chewed out by the vice president, being told by President Trump there are no cards. And it seemed like a disaster in America's alliance with Ukraine against Russian aggression. Now we're in 2026. Zelensky is actually on the rise in the Oval Office with the very successful NATO meeting, Trump's decision to allow Ukraine to produce Patriot missiles in Ukrainian territory. And Zelensky is coming here to D.C., one, to continue that good relationship with Trump, but two, actually, he has to convince some Democrats who are leery of the sanctions bill, originally co-sponsored by Lindsey Graham, that would give President Trump more discretion in levying these secondary sanctions and anti-Russia, anti-Iran sanctions. So Zelensky's now up, and Bibi, by contrast, it's not quite what he's down. That's unclear, but it's also the case that the unity that characterized Trump and Netanyahu's relationship at the beginning of Operation Epic Fury and Operation Roaring Lion has turned into more of kind of a distant, contact, distant friendship. And Netanyahu, I think, coming not necessarily to make the case to restart the war, as some of us have made in public, but kind of supplementing Trump's decision-making with new intelligence about all the bad business the Iranians are up to.
I am very confused because Trump, in the end, policy-wise, I don't see much in the way of daylight between Trump and Netanyahu, in part because the Lebanon issue was resolved into Israel's benefit. So remember that the first point of real contention was that the Iranians had insisted that an Israeli halt on striking Hezbollah be part of the memorandum of understanding and the ceasefire. So not only is the memorandum of understanding gone, that was never really an important part of it. And then as this was going on, Secretary of State Rubio brokered an arrangement between Israel and Lebanon that put the government of Israel and the government of Lebanon on the same side against Hezbollah.
And that seems to be going forward relatively well, in contrast to J.D. Vance's MOU, which, of course, is just non-operative at this point. So this is all sort of imagistic. That is to say, I think everybody presumes that Bibi is a super hawk in relation to Iran and would just like America to bomb Iran until Iran no longer exists. I don't know, actually, how true that is. That is to say, I don't know, depending on what they think the situation is with the nuclear program, that the Israelis certainly don't need to play an active role in the question of the Strait of Hormuz. That's not in their bailiwick, and that's not part of the reason that they would be involved. Obviously, making the rubble bounce on the nuclear program would be something that they would enjoy, or at least think was, sent the cardinal message to whatever this new version of the Iranian regime is. But and they're also not party yet to the Houthis' attack on Saudi Arabian shipping.
Right.
So what seems to have happened, remember, Israel did not participate in the 13 days of bombings that Trump initiated when the MOU broke down. Of course, Iran retaliated throughout this period, and that led to the deaths of our soldiers in Jordan. Israel's not a part. And the understanding, or at least the sense, was that Iran didn't want to attack Israel because they didn't want to get hit by Israel in return. And of course, it didn't want Hezbollah hit because Hezbollah has been quiet in the past month or so. So what we have now is we have no war. We have no war in the sense that the United States and Iran are not fighting. We also have no deal, which is fine with Israel and it's fine with me too, because it means we're not paying the Iranians money. And we have the blockade back in place. And so we're kind of in this limbo state that I think Trump is okay with, because the Iranians aren't shooting, we're not shooting, but we do have the economic pressure from that blockade. But however, I'm not fine with it because it's just a matter of time before Iran starts shooting again. I mean, it seems to me that it's just a matter of time before one IRGC commander or the head of the IRGC says, you know what, we need to extract more from the Americans. They're not serious about giving us the money we need, so let's just shoot up some stuff. And then we're right back where we started.
We also have the ever-present specter of talks. Trump claiming that Iran wants to talk, then Iran says they don't. And at this point, I don't even know what the talks would be aimed at. What is? I mean, really, what's left?
Same thing they've been talking about since last year. It's I think Amit Segal had a good catch in his newsletter this morning, where he was saying, Trump said on Air Force One on his way to Michigan yesterday that talks are going well, they're going great. And then Amit had a quote from Trump on like February 22nd, 2026, earlier this year rather, where Trump said, talks are going well, talks are going great, Iranians want a deal. And then, of course, 5 days later, Trump launches the war in coordination with Israel. So, right, what is the talks? The talks buy Iran time because they can resupply, they can reassert their control. We have news today that they are preparing a large public square for public executions of dissidents. Once again, they're continuing their murderous campaign against their own people. And it just buys them time. They can try to smuggle more money, oil to China, get some funds that way. Buys Trump time because Trump clearly is constrained by the markets. He pauses when oil was above $100, Brent crude. He pauses the attacks, and now it's dropped now to below $90 a barrel. And so that means he gets some short-term relief, both economically, and then it takes a couple days, couple weeks, but you'll get it politically too. However, it doesn't solve the underlying situation, which is Iran's regime and its attempt to exert control over the Strait of Hormuz and to build a nuclear weapon that it can terrorize the world with.
I don't know that we have much more to say, except I think it is important to talk about the difference between the visit that Zelensky is making today and the visit that he made last year. The conduct of J.D. Vance during that meeting was shocking and appalling. And Vance riled Trump up. Trump said this thing about how you have no cards, you don't have the cards, you don't have the cards. And here we are a year later, and Ukraine is on the offensive. Ukraine has shown an unbelievable amount of innovation and audacity in the way that it is conducting its effort to get Russia to back down, get out, and end the conflict that it so foolishly started 4.5 years ago. And I think that Trump is responding because he likes a winner. And Zelensky has pulled a third quarter, he's like the Knicks. I mean, it's like he's down 20 and then suddenly he's tied. And that's very impressive. And the Ukrainians are very impressive and the Russians are not. And so I just think we find ourselves at an interesting moment at which, why wouldn't Trump be happy to have Zelensky there? advocating on Capitol Hill that he have more power. That is essentially what the sanctions bill that Lindsey Graham was championing is about. Give the president more tools to go after Russia, basically, since he doesn't want to go after them by giving Ukraine a lot of arms or money or anything like that. But this is the most passive but most powerful way that he can do it. And so they are actually now on the same side. And I don't think that anybody would have guessed that this is where we would be here at the end of July 2026 after that horror show, which was, I don't know, what was it, May of 25, something like that? I don't remember.
No, it was like February. It was early
I
on.
tried to black it out.
Yeah. Yeah, black it out. So, I mean, this is a sign. History is contingent. Like people change facts on the ground. The Ukrainians have changed the facts.
In that sense, the future is also what Trump needs to hear about from Zelensky, and I think he's starting to get that, right? Which, the other day, this Ukrainian writer Alexander Lutsenko translated for the Times of Israel a report that was put together entirely in Ukrainian by a Ukrainian think tank about Russia's drone strategy. And it was very interesting because I don't read Russian or Ukrainian. And so these are things that I wouldn't necessarily come across. And seeing it, you notice two things. One, the extent to which the Ukrainians are paying, not that this is surprising in itself, but paying close attention to everything that Russia does and what it means, and also the networks that Russia is a part of. We have more insight into that. And this particular report was about how Russia is using fiber optic drones because they can't be jammed. Fiber optic drones are attached by a fiber to, essentially a wire to the person controlling it. And they can go up to, some can go up to 30, 40, 50 miles, I think even. I mean, they're getting better at that. And he points out that Hezbollah is looking at those, and Hezbollah has killed Israelis with, they don't have the huge stockpile of this that Russia has or the huge industry, but it's migrating around the world. The future of warfare is changing along with the battlefield in Ukraine. Russia is adapting to the fact that Ukraine figured out how to stop its onslaught of drones. And they are now investing huge amounts of money in unjammable drones, which means they have to build, the factories that can build all the things and all the pieces. They need the materials they need. The drones are constructed differently. The wires are constructed differently. But the larger point is that this is an actual real shift in warfare. It's not limited to Ukraine, although even saying limited to Ukraine is silly because it's a land war in Europe. So, this is the future of warfare playing out before our eyes. Ukraine is adapting, in some cases magnificently, and they are doing it on, kind of a shoestring budget in a way, but they're using their brains. And I think that Trump is beginning to see that when Zelensky says, I'll go to the UAE and help them understand how to put some sort of umbrella system in the air to stop Iranian drones from falling on them. That is a crossover. It's like that old Marvel, crossover joke. Zelensky to the UAE in the middle of the Iran. And then you see how all this works. Everything is connected. None of this, the other part of that report, is that none of this is possible without China because of the raw materials needed for all of this. And so you are seeing, here's how the sanctions work. Here's what the sanctions miss. Here's how they get around them. Here's everything that people are going to need for future warfare. It's coming out of Ukraine. And I think you'd be crazy at this point not to try to download everything that's in Zelensky's brain and, and put it with your own staff.
I think it's another reminder that the closest thing Trump has to a North Star or a guiding principle in foreign policy that's morally based is that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon, which he's reiterated again and again for decades. But otherwise, he will back a winner. And it again gives the lie to Russiagate. and Russia, because he's perfectly willing to back Ukraine when he sees success demonstrated on the battlefield. And I think he's been quite impressed with what Zelensky has demonstrated the ability to do in Ukraine.
And there's one other aspect, too, which is, I think, becoming clear, is that a strong Ukraine helps Trump reduce America's involvement in the NATO alliance. And we saw this come out by the Undersecretary of Policy, Bridge Colby, announced a whole new operational concept for America's relation with NATO over X yesterday. Again, a reduction in force, American forces. Ukraine has the largest army in Europe. It has this huge and expanding defense industrial base. We're going to help them increase it further with this licensing of the Patriot production. And a stronger Ukraine, I think, might appeal to Trump in the sense that, well, let the Ukrainians and the Poles and the kind of frontline nations who are most concerned about Russian aggression increase the burden, take the burden, and America can leave. So it's a somewhat cynical outcome, but I think it's another factor here at work.
I mean, I do think that, and then we should move on, but I do think it's important that Seth's point about how warfare is changing in real time as a result of these two wars, or you could actually say beginning with the Ukraine war in 22 and then moving on to the Israeli war with in Gaza 23 onward, and then on to this conflict with Iran. We are acting relatively conventionally, right? We're using airplanes to drop bombs, and then defensive munitions to protect what we can protect. But all of these innovations, including what the Iranians are trying to do, obviously on the using the cheapest weapons to do the most damage, all of that signals a kind of revolution. People used to talk about the revolution in military strategy 25 years ago, and moving to a quicker, fleeter, more advanced, more technological military. And this is now, I assume, what is going to happen. That we are not going to say, okay, here's what we do. We're just going to rebuild our military back to the military that it was after before the Iran war. We got to build a different military, and we now have real world anecdotal evidence and hard evidence of what kinds of things we're going to need in the future. And so, to the extent that Ukraine has been a canary in the coal mine because it had a conventional army of gigantic size move toward it in a way that should have, and everybody thought would, eat it up in 3 weeks. And it's now 4.5 years later, and they've taken 10% of the territory they thought they might take in those 4 years. Means infantry wars are not what's going to be the way things go. And our conventional bombing of Iran not ending the regime suggests that there are other ways that we need to go. And so there are two militaries in the world that are innovative enough and fleet enough and on our side enough to be partners with us in this. One of them is our partner, Israel, which was the junior partner, according to Trump, in this war. And there's Ukraine, which Trump does not want to think of as a partner. For whatever reason, for whatever's going on, whatever.
I mean, what I would say is, again, ironically, the change in warfare with the autonomous warfare, drones and missiles. We debuted our autonomous surface vessels, rescuing the Apache pilots earlier this summer. That actually, I think, increases the likelihood of forever wars. As you mentioned, the open warfare, the direct invasion of Ukraine by Russia happened in 2022, And here we are midway through 2026, and Russia's still fighting, Ukraine's still defending. Ukraine, of course, now launching attacks with these massive drone swarms inside Russia, including Russia's capital, Moscow, blowing up oil infrastructure, going after economic infrastructure like this massive retailer, Wildberries, I think is the name. They hit the big warehouse last week. And then Russia responds and fires the missiles that Ukraine has a harder time defending against. That's why Zelensky wants the Patriots, because you need anti-missile defense is different from an anti-drone defense. And then these missile barrages kill, 24 civilians, something like that. It just goes on. And there's something similar emerging in the Strait of Hormuz, absent a escalation by Trump, which is, one drone hits a ship going through the Strait of Hormuz, and the price of oil jumps 10%. And then that means Trump fires some missiles back. And so this huge change in warfare, which I agree is completely transformative, and just wait until these drones have, AI in them and are making decisions autonomously. That's transformative, but it's like every change in warfare, it's not going to be great. There's
a related point, something to look out for with all this, excuse me, is that the more high tech all this war fighting gets, and the more autonomous the weaponry, the more it makes the idea of ground troops seem like an anachronism. And that's, to a U.S. that's already allergic to the idea.
Well, until the ground forces are autonomous.
Right.
I mean, that's the other lesson I just think from the transformation is that what I've seen in both conflicts is that the new technology of warfare seems to give the advantage to the defense.
But
because you can build in and you just kind of fire these things back, and it's preventing any force from kind of occupying space and territory.
I mean, look, the question is whether everything is now moved backward or tossed upside down, which is to say that the reason that the war in Iran is not over and that we did not win the war in Iran is that we made a deliberate, conscious decision, the United States, to fight this war without ground troops. It's not that you would have started, or troops, or like boots on the ground. Let's not say troops. Let's say it's forces, because that's like 100,000 people. That's not what I'm talking about. If you combine, right, an incredibly solid air campaign that has them reeling with a strategy that involves special forces or whatever, or various other things, that then after you do the bombing and terror and like throw them totally off kilter and off key, then you go and do stuff on the ground secondarily. You soften the battlefield, then you go in with no, with very little opposition. That's when you're like, okay, now we have something to talk about. You want us to get out? We'll negotiate. You want us to leave your territory? We'll negotiate. But as it happens, we don't have much to negotiate with because we're not holding anything of theirs that they want back. So in that sense, we've always had the idea that, you need to use a real war is a war that involves going in on the ground.
I think, there was a plan. The Israeli plan was to arm the Kurds and to use intelligence to foment a rebellion. And then, as I was arguing at the time that the war started, the ground force would be the Iranian people. Right. That would be the ground force. And that's essentially what happened in Libya. There was already an armed faction that was fighting Gaddafi, and then NATO and the United States provided the air cover for. And then, of course, we never got involved in the Syrian civil war, but once Turkey supplied Jelani's forces, Shiraz forces, whatever name he goes by now, they were able to go and make the final assault on Damascus and send him into exile. Trump stopped that because I think it's clear that Trump is more worried about regime collapse than he is about an indefinite and prolonged no deal, no war type scenario. And that, to your point, John, that is effectively deterring the United States from accomplishing its goals.
I also think he clearly also doesn't want to do a real escort operation through the strait. He announced that and backed off of it. And he's resisted doing a real operation with B-2 bombers that would attack Pickaxe Mountain and send in ground troops to obtain and remove the nuclear material. I do have the sense that he was spooked by these 3 deaths because we got word that 3 deaths of American combat troops yes. And we know through the first Trump administration and this Trump administration that this president doesn't like death. He doesn't like killing, much as he talks a big game. And oftentimes when he's talking the biggest, it is a sign that he's about to back off. And I do think this spooked him. He knows that it's bad for his poll numbers and that the American public isn't really behind this war. But those are 2 other options that he's considered and not gone with. And he is going with really the lowest cost, lowest return, longest, the most prolonged operation here, which is the blockade. That's going to take the longest to see any kind of return and to exert pain on Iran, a year.
Right. So and then we should move on. But it's very important that you brought that up because there are people, as I said this yesterday, and we've said over the weeks, that there are people who think that is the right strategy, that in fact the way to bring the regime down without, since you couldn't bring it down with the decapitation, is to literally choke it till it collapses. And the only way to do that is the blockade of its export capacity. And that is a serious program and will take a year. And the virtue of it, I guess, is that it does feature, it means you're doing a very low intensity conflict. You're not doing tit for tat bombing. You are just squeezing and squeezing and squeezing and squeezing. Now that means that the war is longer, although not particularly deadly. I mean, that's the thing is that it could be the best of both worlds for Trump also because it effectively removes the war from the front pages anyway. Because if there aren't like constant active skirmishes and all of that, except what there is we maybe do start escorting ships if this strategy pays off, and we're just making it impossible for them to get their stuff out.
I know we want to move on, but that leaves out the Iranians who also have agency. And that's why we're just going to get right back to where we were 2 weeks ago.
They did just kill, under these conditions, they did just take out 3 American service members.
Right. Well, I mean, again, 3 is not 300, 3 is not 1,000. And if it's a harbinger of things to come and Trump reads the tea leaf there as we better come up with a different way to go forward here, then you may be right. I just, I find it hard to believe that the U.S. military changes an entire war strategy on the basis of the deaths of 3 people because they were unable to intercept a missile that they otherwise might have intercepted. But you could well be right. Okay. So
we should talk about El-Sayed and Stevens.
So last night in Michigan, Haley Stevens-Abdul El-Sayed had a debate. It was an interesting debate. Some of us watched it all the way through. Some of us watched pieces of it. And the election is a week from today. So I've been going around asking pundits and others, friends of mine, what they thought, who won, who lost, whatever. And nobody seems to be able to come up with much of an answer, although the El-Sayed campaign is so adept or so determined that there was an online poll of the Detroit News, and within an hour, the respondents to the online poll, meaning you just log in and vote, was 96-4 for El-Sayed. That he won 96% to 4%.
Well, he's certainly overrepresented among the online trolls. That's for sure.
Yeah, when you watch on YouTube,
he just used Rand Paul's email list.
Yeah.
My takeaway was that pro-Israel Democrats have got to come up with a better response to those who are supported by AIPAC and who are going to, be pro-Israel, who are pro-Israel, have got to come up with a better response, because it seemed to me throughout the debate, her responses were insufficient. She did not handle them head on. And that was his main attack line against her, was $46 million of AIPAC support, $46 million of AIPAC support. And she dodged them the whole time. She seemed ashamed of it. She seemed afraid of it. And her response that I'm going to be a workhorse and he's a show horse seemed to me insufficient. And I'm not sure if she's noticed, but we're electing a lot of show horses to the United States Congress. And it would be nice to see a Democratic candidate say, I'm happy to have their support. I'm proud of their support. And I stand with Israel and the Jewish people. Perhaps you can't say that in Democratic politics anymore, but I was not impressed by the responses, and I don't think they're going to do it. They have got to come up with a better response.
Well, they can't, because their primary electorate is functionally anti-Semitic now. It's just the fact of the matter. So Haley Stevens couldn't say what you wanted her to say, because to say so would be suicide. I mean, that political suicide. I wish that weren't the case, but it seems to be the case, particularly in a state where Muslims outnumber Jews. Not that 250,000 Jews in a state of 11 million people aren't going to flip a vote, but there are 400,000 Muslims, 250,000 Jews. This is the one state in which this is the case, and so she is functioning in a very, very difficult atmosphere.
I understand that, but I think she could have said, if you want to stand with the would-be bomber of a synagogue down the street, that's on you. If your position toward that is anybody who's hurt can go bomb a synagogue filled with 4-year-olds, that's on you. That hurt people,
I think you're telegraphing Mike Rogers' message.
Right. That's the problem.
As soon as El-Sayed becomes the nominee.
But that's the problem, is it's Mike Rogers' message. Too many people in the electorate that she is facing would not be motivated by what she says about this, because they don't care about it. And it might alternately motivate the people who want to vote for Sayed to drag themselves over glass to vote for El-Sayed.
She did say one thing. She said that she supported the two-state solution between Israel and the Palestinians, and by contrast, she said Al-Sayed can't even say whether he supports Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state. That seems to be kind of the bright line that I'm detecting in Democratic politics, which I mean is it's amazing to consider the red shift now that's what they're fighting. That's what they're potentially fighting over, because of course Al-Sayed shares this refusal to support Israel as a Jewish state with America's most prominent anti-Semite, Zoran Mamdani, and that's kind of the cutting edge. So I was struck actually by the fact that she would say even that you know what, I do support a two-state solution, and you can't even say that Israel has a right to exist. But I think
it's hilarious that we've gotten to now what the position that you can take that is the hardest line possible position is the fantasy position that
in the Democratic Party, right?
Is even a policy possibility.
Well, it's a European thing. If Europe does it, then progressive Democrats have to do it too.
It was the default position of the United States, both parties, for what? 50 years.
Bush adopted for the Democrats for quite a bit, and then for 30 years, and then Bush adopted it in 2002, right? In the speech, the June speech, right, where he said, "I support a two-state solution."
But effectively.
Yeah.
The idea of Palestinian separation between Israel and the Palestinians that involved Palestinian self-governance at the very least was a position dating back to the Nixon administration.
Here's what, can you all help me understand this? My puzzle for this primary has always been is that the polls up until there are not many polls in this Democratic primary.
Amazingly how few.
But basically up until 2 weeks ago, Stevens was winning in the polls, even though the poly market has had El-Sayed favored for months now. And then we had this one poll from Data for Progress, which is a left-wing polling organization, came out again about 2 weeks ago, mid-July, showing him with a 13-point lead. And that's the last poll that's on the Real Clear Politics tracking here. So I'm not sure whether it's as clear cut in his favor.
Oh, I don't think so at all.
As we are being told from every direction. That's what I just can't figure out.
You have got to look at the fact that Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, endorsed Haley Stevens,
right? Yeah.
That if she were losing, if it were the consensus inside the Michigan Democratic Party that, look, we got to face it, she's losing by 10 points. Gretchen Whitmer would not endorse her. It would be foolishness. And Gretchen Whitmer is an extremely cautious politician,
popular governor.
Cautious. So I think they are seeing this race as winnable for Stevens, or that Stevens is actually ahead, because, as you say, there is no evidence that
that's where that online poll that you mentioned plays into this. It's because the base of the socialist wing of the Democrats is so online and so energized and so active. It does kind of create, like we always say with social media, this Plato's cave effect. And so that's, but then I've been looking, but then there's that one poll. I mean, the 13-point lead is pretty big, but again, it seems like to me an outlier. There's one other aspect which is interesting here, which is that the moderator asked El-Sayed whether he was a socialist, and then added, not that there's anything wrong with that, which, come on, please.
It was amazing.
Do you need to editorialize? Yeah. You need to replay a Seinfeld episode
because
from 35 years ago?
The moderator is also afraid of the DSA. That's the.
But he said he's not. That was fascinating.
He said he was a capitalist,
which is a lie. Like everything he says is a lie, including his resume, as Eliana and the Free Beacon have been pointing out. But the fact that he felt forced to say it, or because he's a slippery character, felt that was the more politic response, does suggest to me, again, he's a little bit worried about some of the political atmospherics of being branded far left.
He is trying to run away from the DSA and to say he is not a part of them. And the Beacon did a piece on this, showcasing all the fundraisers he's done with the DSA. He has raised money for them. He has been photographed arm in arm with Rashida Tlaib and the squad.
His platform is the DSA platform.
And his platform is the DSA platform, just like Troy Jackson out in Maine. But he is now, in the closing days of the race, making real efforts to run away from them. And I think it is because he is seeing polling, and Haley Stevens capitalized on this. And this was the other interesting part of the debate, showing real weaknesses among Black voters. And she talked about going to campaign in small businesses owned by African Americans. And she, I think, understands clearly that this is where his weakness is. And she accused him of neglecting the Black community and not paying attention to them. And he seems to understand that acutely.
Well, she's got to keep pressing it because
he had an agenda that Eliana laid out very well, which is corporations are buying Haley Stevens and Jews are buying Haley Stevens, and corporations and Jews are the same thing, and $46 million, and she's standing on the shoulder, and I don't take money from corporations or AIPAC.
I only take money from my Hamas father-in-law. That's the only person I take money from. You know, $300,000.
Uncorruptible.
Because he's a landlord. He's a global landlord. So what does he need to take money from people for? He just raises rent out in
from
wherever.
Indians and Emiratis and my wife's psychology practice that doesn't accept Medicaid, and it is amazing he was not asked about that.
Yeah. Okay. So my point, he had a message, and I thought it got monotonous. Now, again, I don't think people are going to watch as is always the case, it's the clips that they show on Michigan TV or whatever they're going to matter. And I don't know what those are. There was no moment of any particular poof that you can say, well, that's what they're going to cut out and run for either side. But she also had a very deliberate, practiced strategy. She was, I'm talking about Michigan, and implicitly it's, this guy is talking about Israel, and I'm talking about Michigan.
And it was also
talking about 2028.
2028. Exactly.
The playbook just the other day. Hey, how he's going to reshape the primary field and primary Fetterman, force him out of Fetterman might not be a Democrat by 2028, but nonetheless, he clearly has huge ambitions. So it's smart. It's smart of her to say, I want to represent you, Michiganders.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I think in a funny way, she's running the way Susan Collins runs.
I was about
to
say,
okay,
she is. Her message is, I'm going to be the next Susan Collins. I'm going to put my head down. I'm going to work. You're not going to see my name in lights. And this guy, he writes books. He went to host a podcast after he lost. He decided to make himself famous. And he's going to be the next DSA national superstar. And he wants to be rich and famous. You know, I'm not a millionaire. I'm a humble public servant, and I'm going to deliver for Michigan.
Anyway, I think the battle lines are drawn that he is running an ideological race and she is running an anti-ideological race. She is running a deliberately counter-ideological race. She's there to deliver for people in Michigan. And whether or not this now depends on what the Democratic electorate in Michigan looks like a week from today. You know, will it be dominated by, or will it be disproportionately Ann Arbor and Lansing and people, you know, and sort of those sorts of people who will, you know, go overwhelmingly for El-Sayed and Dearborn and whatever. Or will it be the suburbs of, the ring suburbs of Detroit and other places where Democrats live and survive in Michigan, who are going to be like, as you say, and the African American community who'll be like, I don't want to hear the word AIPAC anymore. Like, this guy is obsessed with AIPAC. And my oil prices are at $5, and she says she'll fight Trump, and that's good enough for me. So it's an interesting test case. She's running as a normie. He is running as a shatterer, and this state will be a very interesting test of what the Democratic electorate in a large space, right? This is not a huge state, but it's a pretty, it's 11 million people. So, like, it's bigger than Maine. It's bigger than New York City. And so it's statewide. And this is the first real statewide challenge for the DSA. And so, we got.
There's something else I noticed. I don't know if all of you will agree with me or not. I don't know how other people see this, but Stephen strikes me as one of those figures who show up and is remarkably awkward, strange. You're not sure what to make of her, and then you find, before you know it, that she's grown on you in some strange way. There's something endearing, and I think, in particular, it works. It may be working for her because El-Sayed is so slick. He's
kind of like the Parks and Rec affect.
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
right. Yeah,
It's like,
But-
we kind of like those people on that show.
Yeah,
They
exactly
mean
right.
well.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
But it also does a
she's
lot.
Leslie Nope,
Right.
and he's Stalin. I mean,
Right.
it's like, who do you
Yeah,
want?
who would you rather have
Right.
represent you?
Yeah.
Right. It's pretty easy. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's true. I mean, she's playing that, right? I mean, like,
There's
Embrace
the
it.
last
Someone
line
said
of a
she's code
JTA.
switch. Yeah.
She did this. JTA did the story about how somebody who's already voted for El-Sayed approached her in a diner, and she sat down. She didn't know he had already voted, for El-Sayed, but they're talking about it. This guy is all in on anti-Israel stuff. He loves El-Sayed because he says he's 100% on voting on the Palestinians. And the way that Haley Stevens handles the discussion is very interesting, but a great example of this. And the last line in the she says she name dropped a Palestinian supporter of hers. She mentioned legislation targeting China that she's worked on with my colleague Rokana. She just sort of bakes this stuff in, and then she the last line in the piece is she also turned to her staff and excitedly indicated to Singletary, who was the guy who voted against it, he voted for Abdul in the primary and he came here to talk to me. Like, look, he doesn't like me and he came here to talk to me anyway. How great is that? Look at this guy. He's so interesting. He voted for Abdul. We're going to have a conversation. It's like the most Midwestern thing you could possibly imagine is being able to feign genuine excitement at sitting with somebody who has already voted against you when you're spending 23 hours a day eating, sleeping, and, breathing the campaign trail and all that stuff. And you really don't have much, 45 minutes to waste on a guy who just wants to tell you why he already voted against you. But she does it with a smile. And that, I think she's betting on that persona. She's betting on the fact that she goes to all, when she told El-Sayed in the debate, you really ought to visit Michigan sometime, essentially. She's betting that people will remember the way she is in these personal settings. No one's gonna care that this guy Singletary was there because he voted for her opponent or whatever. The point is that she wants to rack up the miles and the hours of Michiganders just seeing her being a Michigander.
Right.
And that's going to be enough. And it might be.
So, in other words, he's internationalizing the race and she is localizing the race. And that's just an interesting face-off. I mean, they are both playing to their strengths and they are going to their corners and they're going to fight this way. And I don't know that anybody has the foggiest clue how this is going to end up. But in some ways, it's a useful barometer for what life is left in the Democratic Party for people who do not want the Democratic Party to focus on issues that aren't directly related to what is going on with them. He is talking about Medicare for all, right? So at least he's talking about healthcare. That's like his one domestic thing that he talks about. He doesn't talk about anything else. She talks about, she's like, I did the corn and, subsidy act of 2018. And she's like talking boring details because that's what Congress is. It's boring, bring home the bacon stuff. And I know where we're going. Now, I do know where we want to go because I think we really do want to talk about these two leaks or two releases of information. One, Anthony Fauci's diary, and the other, the public release of the testimony and stuff surrounding the Robert Hurr investigation into Joe Biden's handling of classified information. If you famously remember that Hurr said that he had enough evidence to indict Biden, but that he chose not to on the grounds that no court would ever convict his client or not his client, the opposite of his client, because he was essentially senile. I mean, he didn't say senile, but that's what he said. And so the transcript, what we saw yesterday, bears this out.
He said,
entirely.
well-meaning man with poor memory, something like that.
Yeah. So, which of course we all understand, and I think most of America now understands that Biden was intellectually infirm through much of his presidency. But of course, that just brings us back to the question of the Democratic Party's handling of power and whether or not, this cover-up of Biden's incapacity will be among the most irresponsible uses of power, or the hunger for power that we'll ever see.
I certainly think so. But two things. The first is, it's amazing to me how quickly the public and the media have just moved on from Biden and what was done to cover up Biden's condition and the extremely haphazard way in which Biden dropped out of the race in 2024 and Harris kind of seized the nomination. We're talking about 2028. Axios pronounced Harris the front runner. This story, which is an interesting story, it should be a much bigger story, and it should have been a bigger story for months. Not only after Biden dropped out, but for the months leading up to the debate with Trump, where his condition was exposed. And we got a brief revival of the story when Jill Biden's memoir came out, but then that kind of faded away as well.
It's not out yet. The news of his memoir.
No, Jill Biden's.
Jill Bart. I thought you said Joe.
Dr. Biden's memoir when it came out. Yes, and she made the rounds. And then the news of he has his but we have to think about what kind of publicity he will even do. There was a story recently about how his circle is tightening. He doesn't get out much. Yeah. And then the other thing I would just say about this is we just went through this again with Plattner. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
The Democratic establishment says, don't look here, don't look here, don't look here. The major media institutions parrot them until all of a sudden the problem becomes undeniable. And then they, quickly scurry around, find a new solution, and then pretend that nothing happened and everything is hunky-dory. It's fascinating to watch it work. They haven't learned anything, and this is going to be the pattern that will characterize future screw-ups like this.
Okay, I want to propose a scenario to you for 2027, late 2027. Kamala Harris is in the race. And
I thought you were going to say Fauci is in the race.
Kamala Harris is in the race. It's early debates, and there are 12 people in the race. Somebody is going to say, "You were in on. We had an infirm president, and you were in on the conspiracy to keep him in office. And had he not had the debate that he had, you wouldn't have ended up as the nominee, losing in your own right, but also, what if he had gotten elected? You stood by knowing that this man who could not serve because he was senile was running for re-election for the presidency. You supported, you knew better."
Well,
I think that's...
Let me just say, one, that assumes she debates, because just think if she has a commanding lead, and she look at what Trump did in 2024, and we know that she doesn't want to debate. So, but two, who's going to make that case? It's going to have to be the socialist candidate who does it.
Yeah.
And but that presents their own because I don't think Buttigieg isn't going to make it. Newsom, who's like decided that Hunter Biden's going to be his running mate. He's not going to make it.
I don't know.
Emmanuel's not going to make it. So it's going to have to come from an outsider in order to do that. Right. And I just think that the way the Democrats work is they don't admit fault or disagreement. That doesn't happen, unless it's this insurgent force that is trying to take away their position.
Okay, so let's move on to Fauci, because this is a story so big. We've given ourselves barely any time to talk about it, but this story is huge, and it's so huge that despite the effort to avoid covering it, finally this morning mainstream media outlets are covering it, having refused to cover it yesterday and the day before. So the story is Fauci I think the only real story is Fauci saying in January of 2020, it probably came from the lab and then the animals were an accelerant. That's 2 weeks before the February 2nd group meeting of the epidemiologists and virologists, deciding that they were commonly going to say that it was from the wet market, and structuring this group of people to create a kind of phalanx to hold firm to that line as 2020 went on, and then 2021, and then starting to go literally at the throats of and the careers of anybody who dared say, this smells to me. There's a virology lab right there where they were doing gain of function research. It beggars belief that that's not where this came from. That's the smoking gun. And for some reason, the New York Times' story and stuff like that quote it, but then say there's nothing new because he said something like it in an interview 2 weeks later, which I don't remember. I mean, I guess they didn't quote it, but I'm just saying, like, he said he believed that it was probably out of the lab. And then he was talked into the idea of saying that it wasn't from the lab. And then by 3 months later, anybody who said it was from the lab was being deplatformed and attacked, and people wanted to, get them fired from their university positions. And the Great Barrington Declaration was suppressed. All of that with Fauci's foreknowledge that it was probably a lab leak.
It's also unclear why looking back, why they had to go through all that too.
Oh, it's not. It's not. Because I'm going to tell you, no, because you don't remember the atmosphere. The atmosphere was Trump is a xenophobe who is trying to make America
anti-Asian hate.
Yeah.
And if you say it came from a lab, you're contributing to an atmosphere of hostility towards Chinese Americans and to the Chinese in general. Yeah. And Fauci and the NIH were also funding this gain of function research, and his friends in the nonprofit, NGO health community had
Peter
been
Daszak.
Yeah, Peter Daszak were participating in this research and had personal interest in this particular research, while his political adversaries, in particular Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas, were the first ones out there because of their understanding of the Chinese and how the Chinese operated and the Chinese interest in suppressing dissent and transparency, were the first ones out there to say, hey, this came from Wuhan. There's a virology lab there. And the most likely explanation of this is that it emerged from the lab. And if there is a more salient, searing case of why conservatives don't trust, quote unquote, experts and government expertise, it is this.
But, I also love this, the whole diary revelation, because at the time, liberals and media were saying, thank God, look, Trump is a liar and a narcissist. Thank God there's Fauci, to keep things on track, to be honest with us, with the people. He knows what's happening, And what do we know from Fauci's diary? He is an off-the-charts narcissist, and as we've just been discussing, a very consequential liar. This is incredible to me. I mean, it's not incredible to me, but it's you rarely see such a robust
And by the way,
example of people being foisted by their own
not
petard.
that we didn't know this, but we also see in the diaries the media collusion with all this. We saw it during the pandemic, but we get a glimpse of the fact that he's having dinner with Jake Tapper and hanging out with these people, and they shared in the
he was calling Chris Cuomo every day when Chris Cuomo had COVID to check in on him to see how he was doing in his basement in East Hampton.
Well, beyond on that note, just beyond the media, comfiness with the government angle of that, Cuomo was at the center of another COVID scandal, which is that his brother was governor and reportedly making available medications and shots that were really supposed to go to elderly and infirm people whose immune systems couldn't handle it much more than Chris Cuomo's was expected to, and things were being diverted. Doctors, were being diverted to resources, state resources to fight this pandemic. Right. It turned out were being diverted to the governor's brother, who also was the CNN anchor and also was talking to Fauci every day.
I don't usually say this, but credit to Senator Rand Paul, because he has been dogged in pursuit of Fauci, and he's the reason we have the diary. And he subpoenaed Fauci to testify before his committee, I believe tomorrow, Wednesday. And that if Rand Paul just limited himself to to pursuing the 100%. Truth about the government and COVID, he'd be in my top 5 senators.
Look, just as the financial meltdown of 2008 had consequences for electoral politics in the United States for at least 4 election cycles after it, including the next presidential election, we are not done with COVID. COVID is not done with us as a political issue. We have slight amnesia about the extraordinarily extreme national response to this disease and the harms that it did. And now, if you're not a parent of a teenager who was a teenager then, you know it less, or a kid then less. And, as we know, that not fewer people are having children and all of that. But there is no one on earth who, reminded of COVID, does not get angry about it. And so this, as it comes, continues the 2 extreme political efforts, the efforts on the extremes to say you cannot trust government and you need to overthrow it, right? That's the sort of Trump, MAGA, will do anything, deep state. And then there's the DSA, which I think, weirdly enough, may be the twisted democratic version of the response to COVID, because things are responded to in weird ways. And if the idea is Biden was corrupt because he gave Bibi too much latitude in Gaza, that's what they may say, but a mass of voters may be saying Biden was bad, but what they really think that Biden was bad about,
John,
was COVID.
John, the people who were voting for DSA liked COVID. They were the ones who were triple masking. They were the ones who still wear the masks out in public. Uh-huh. They liked COVID. They liked the experts telling them what to do. That I don't think. I have to just part with you there. I think the DSA is something that has been a plan in the making that predates COVID. And in fact, of course, they were to the degree that Republicans outperformed expectations in 2020. It was the DSA that was responsible for it because of the George Floyd summer and because of Green New Deal, Medicare for All, Bernie Sanders. So I agree with you that, yes, we're not done with COVID, but I think the DSA is something slightly different.
Okay. Anyway, we're going to talk more about Fauci over the course of the week, because this is a very very big deal, generationally big deal. It's just it's like a slow moving bomb that will, explode. It's already exploded for a lot of us, but I don't know to the extent to which it is the public health disaster community stuff has exploded the way that it will explode as time goes on here with this, like White House tapes thing out of COVID here. I mean, it's that level. It's that level. It's like the release of the Nixon tapes. This is Fauci's internal monologue as he was directing the country's response and the closure of schools and all of that and controlling American lives.
I just connected a little bit. I mean, the mania that kind of expressed itself in ultra COVID awareness, don't leave your house for years, triple mask, all of that, then transmuted into George Floyd, racial reckoning. Then we had also transmuted into the trans hysteria. It's now anti-Semitism. It's now the Jews. I mean, that's the latest iteration of whatever this kind of irrational mania is that's been haunting us now for almost a decade, and it's all concentrated on the Jews. And of course, that's something we have to fight against every day.
Okay, Matt, you have a recommendation, I believe.
I do, John. Thank you. I taught a class for the Hertog Foundation, which is a educational nonprofit I'm associated with, and any college-age student who's listening to my voice or watching us on YouTube, where I hope you like and subscribe. Thank you. They should look up the Hertog Foundation. I taught a class on conservatism and revolution this summer. I won't go into the details, but it was a great, I really enjoyed teaching it. And it was an opportunity for me to learn more about the French Revolution, which, I knew the basics, but I didn't quite know the exact chronological order. And so I just want to recommend a book which is one of the best history books I've ever read. It's called The Oxford History of the French Revolution by the British historian William Doyle. It's been through several editions. I think the current one is a third edition since he first wrote it. And it's just an excellent introduction to the French Revolution, covering every aspect, the causes, the development, the outcome. And Doyle is a brilliant writer and someone who has a very kind of tragic view of history and also kind of a very dry wit. So I would like to recommend a book. It's been a while since I've done that, and I think if you're interested in learning more about the French Revolution and its disturbing parallels to today, you should check out The Oxford History of the French Revolution by William Doyle.
Thank you so much. Nice elevated offering.
I told you to be academic.
The end of July. Absolutely. So we will be back tomorrow. Thanks to Matt. And for Eliana, Seth, and Abe, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.